For months, Vladimir Putin has been making bold threats and moves that have rattled the world. But now the United States has had enough, and they're calling his bluff in the biggest way yet. Behind the scenes, plans are already underway for a major response that could change the game entirely. A powerful move designed to hit Russia where it hurts most and send a clear message. Enough is enough. What does this punishment look like? How will it reshape the global balance of power? And what does it mean for the future of the conflict? Stay tuned, because this is the moment when diplomacy meets decisive action, and the consequences will be felt far beyond Moscow. Putin's playing a dangerous game, and soon he's going to see exactly what that costs him. Ever since talks about a ceasefire started floating around, Russian President Vladimir Putin's been sending mixed signals, pretending he wants peace, but only on terms that would basically erase Ukraine's independence. On one hand, he says Russia is ready to make peace. On the other, he demands conditions that would turn Ukraine into a puppet state, answering to Moscow instead of standing on its own 2 feet. The US isn't buying it. Instead, Washington is gearing up to hit Putin where it really hurts his economy. Big trouble's coming for Russia. Senators are drafting a new wave of sanctions that could cripple Putin's war machine for good. And here's the kicker: this isn't just a partisan effort. Republicans and Democrats alike are backing a powerful new sanctions bill that could change the course of the conflict. On May 22nd, United 24 Media reported that Senators Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey unveiled a bold new proposal in the Senate. This bill isn't messing around. It slaps a whopping 500% tariff on any country that imports Russian goods, especially energy like gas, oil, and uranium. If a country buys Russian gas, they'll pay through the nose. Same for oil or other key products. The economic squeeze will be brutal. Graham and Blumenthal say they already have the backing of 81 senators. That's more than 4 out of 5 in the Senate ready to act. And according to Graham, if Putin keeps dragging his feet on peace talks, the Senate will be ready to drop this bombshell of sanctions immediately. If the ceasefire talks keep stalling, the US isn't just going to sit back. They're going to hit Russia and any country still cozying up to Putin's regime with an economic hammer that could end this invasion once and for all. Blumenthal weighed in on the bill, pointing out that Russia is supposed to send its official ceasefire proposal soon, but he's skeptical. In a post on his website, he said that the terms will reveal if Russia is serious about peace, and chances are, it won't be anything new. What he means is Putin's peace demands will likely echo the same tired excuses he's been making since talks began, demands that make peace impossible. For Putin, the whole conflict boils down to one thing: he can't accept Ukraine as a free, independent country. In his mind, Ukraine belongs to Russia, period. So any peace deal that doesn't erase Ukraine's sovereignty isn't peace at all. It's just a pause in a war that's far from over. Senator Richard Blumenthal sees the writing on the wall, and he's not fooled. He fully expects Russia's upcoming peace proposal to be more smoke and mirrors, filled with demands no sane country would ever accept. If that's the case, and all signs say it will be, Blumenthal is making it crystal clear: the US Senate is ready to strike back with serious consequences, and the momentum is real. Blumenthal proudly announced that 81 senators, a supermajority, are already backing a bill that would unleash tough new sanctions on Russia for its brutal invasion of Ukraine. The goal? To cut Russia off even further from the global economy and make it painfully expensive for anyone to do business with Putin. One country in particular is on Blumenthal's radar: China. Since the invasion began, China has become the biggest buyer of Russian oil. And then there's the so-called shadow fleet ships secretly moving Russian oil to dodge existing sanctions. This bill targets both those loopholes and more. Blumenthal is firm but honest. The US wants peace. Everyone wants peace. But after months of stalling and manipulation, the Senate sees through the act. Putin isn't negotiating, he's playing for time. And time is running out. The message from Washington couldn't be clearer. If Putin keeps dragging his feet and putting out fake peace gestures, this new wave of economic pain is going to hit, and hard. The longer he stalls, the closer that hammer comes down. Now Putin's trying to play diplomat. He's been talking about drafting a peace memo, supposedly in coordination with the US, that outlines potential terms for a ceasefire. He hinted it might include timelines, basic conditions, and a temporary truce if certain agreements can be reached. But that's a lot of ifs and maybes for a man who's already made his intentions clear. Because underneath the diplomatic language is a familiar pattern. Putin plans to demand terms that Ukraine can never accept. That way he can blame Ukraine for refusing peace and try to spin it as their fault, another propaganda move in a war of lies. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky isn't falling for it either. After Putin floated his memo idea, Zelensky called it what it is, a stall tactic. He accused the Kremlin of using peace talks as cover to regroup and prolong the war. And he's right. Russia's memo won't be about ending the war. It'll be about shifting the blame, buying time, and setting traps, the same playbook Putin's been using since day one. Zelensky is already warning the world. Don't be fooled, and don't let Ukraine's refusal to surrender be twisted into a PR stunt for Russia. Blumenthal and his Senate allies hear that warning loud and clear, and they're ready to act. Because this time, if Putin keeps pretending he wants peace, the response won't be more talk. It'll be consequences. Russia wants peace, Putin will claim. It's Ukraine that's holding it up. That's the line we're all expecting, but Senators Lindsey and Richard Blumenthal aren't buying it. And this time, neither is the United States. In fact, Putin's problems are piling up fast. While the US prepares a crushing new sanctions bill, the European Union is moving in too, ready to throw its own punch with or without America's help. According to Euronews, the EU is charging ahead with what could become its 18th round of sanctions against Russia. And the pressure is ramping up. The goal? Force Moscow to agree to a 30-day ceasefire, a major first step toward real peace. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made it clear, it's time to turn up the heat. On May 20th, she announced this next round of sanctions, just days after the EU hit Putin's regime with its 17th package. That one targeted around 200 ships in Russia's Shady Shadow fleet, along with 75 individuals and companies connected to the war effort. It even restricted 30 firms involved in dual-use goods products that can serve both civilian and military purposes. Future sanctions may go even further, calling out Russia's hybrid warfare tactics, like sabotaging undersea cables. The EU is swinging hard, but if the US passes its new bill, it could be the knockout punch. So what's in the US bill that has Putin sweating? Unlike the EU's direct approach, the US bill spearheaded by Graham and Blumenthal takes things a step further. It introduces secondary sanctions, meaning it doesn't just hit Russia, it targets any country doing business with Russia. Translation? If you're still buying from Putin, you'll pay big time. One country that should be paying close attention: China. Blumenthal didn't name names for no reason. In 2024, China imported more Russian oil than ever before, hitting a record 108.5 million tons. That's about 2.17 million barrels a day, generating nearly $118 billion in revenue for Moscow. That's money fueling Putin's war machine. The new US bill would force China into a corner. If it keeps buying Russian oil, it risks being hit with a crushing 500% tariff on goods it wants to sell to the US. If it backs off, it loses access to that oil. Either way, China has a tough choice: stick with Putin and pay the price, or cut ties and protect its trade relationship with the US. That's the power of secondary sanctions. They're designed to make supporting Russia so economically painful. No country can justify it. And if China pulls back even partially, it would be a devastating blow to Putin's cash flow. Blumenthal and Graham know exactly what they're doing. This bill isn't just about pressure, it's about cutting off the fuel that keeps Russia's war effort alive. The plan is simple: slam the economic doors shut, isolate Putin, and dry up the billions in oil money funding his aggression. Because if the peace Putin keeps promising is just another stalling tactic, and all signs say it is, then the US and its allies are done waiting. The next move isn't talk, it's action. Russia's economy is still roaring, and that's a problem. In 2024, Russia's federal budget hit a massive $396.7 billion, according to Oxford Energy. That's a 17.9% jump from the previous year. The kicker? Most of that money is coming from the very exports the US and EU were supposed to be choking off with sanctions. A closer look at the data shows that Russia's oil and gas revenues, around $120.3 billion, still make up 30% of its entire federal income. That's a step down from the 50% it relied on a decade ago, sure, but it's still a huge chunk of change. And it's proof that despite years of pressure, Russia has found ways to slip through the cracks. How? One answer: Putin's infamous shadow fleet. Senator Blumenthal wasn't exaggerating when he mentioned it. With an estimated $10 billion sunk into buying ships that are hard to track, Russia is moving oil and gas under the radar quite literally. These ghost ships are delivering energy to countries willing to look the other way. So the U.S. is changing tactics. Blumenthal and Graham's new sanctions bill is designed not just to hit Russia, but to hit anyone doing business with Russia. These are called secondary sanctions, and they're designed to make it nearly impossible for Russia to profit off its exports without dragging other countries into the fire with it. Think of it like this: Russia built a fleet to dodge the law. Now the U.S. is putting spikes on the roads the fleet travels, targeting the customers instead of the trucks. That's how you make Putin's workaround useless. The Atlantic Council actually predicted this approach back in 2018, when it called secondary sanctions a powerful tool to expand the reach of U.S. pressure. They can ban products, freeze assets, and cut off access to financial markets in ways regular sanctions can't. And former President Trump has used them before, like in 2017, when he blocked Venezuela from selling bonds in U.S. markets, choking off one of its last reliable revenue sources. That's the same kind of strategy the U.S. is now aiming at Russia. The 500% tariffs proposed in this new bill would slam the economies of any country still doing business with Putin. That includes rivals like China, which has become Russia's biggest oil customer, and even allies like India, which hasn't fully pulled back from Russian imports. Since the war began, the U.S. has already imposed over 6,400 sanctions on Russia. Add that to the broader tally of 7,300 plus sanctions in total, and you've got a country under a mountain of economic weight. This new bill? It's another heavy straw on the camel's back, and it might just be the one that makes it collapse. But it's not just about economic pressure, it's about global momentum. Every time a nation stops doing business with Russia, Putin loses cash, leverage, and allies. And while countries like China or India won't roll over easily, a 500% tariff on their exports to the U.S. could force their hand. The message is simple and sharp. If you stand with Putin, you'll pay. If you help him make money, you'll lose yours. The U.S. isn't waiting anymore, and the world's starting to feel it. There's more than one way the U.S. could play its new sanctions bill, and it's not just about slapping tariffs and making life tough for Russia. The bill could actually be a tool to pull other countries closer to the U.S. fold. Think of it like a carrot on a stick. The message? Cut ties with Russia, and we'll make it easier for you to trade with us and our allies. It's a classic move, and we've seen it before. During Trump's first term, the administration leaned on several African nations to stick with UN sanctions. The reward? Lifting of U.S. sanctions and better trade opportunities. Take Sudan, for example. When Sudan agreed to cut ties with North Korea, the U.S. responded by easing up on sanctions. Now imagine the same strategy with this new bill. Hit Russia's oil and gas customers with crushing 500% tariffs, then offer those countries a way out if they cut ties with Putin's regime. The U.S. will open trade doors wider for them. If played right, this isn't just about economics. It's a smart geopolitical move that could boost U.S. influence globally while squeezing Putin from both money and allies. And if the carrot doesn't work, the stick is there too. The bill basically says, toe the line, or we'll make trading with you painful, not with tanks or bombs, but with control over the flow of goods and money. This approach also targets countries indirectly, dragging in anyone still helping Russia's economy. China's a perfect example. Blumenthal and Graham's bill puts as much pressure on Beijing as on Moscow. Some see this as a clever way for the Trump administration to keep up its trade war with China while tightening the noose on Russia. Sounds like a win-win, right? But there's a catch. Critics are already raising red flags. Just before Blumenthal and Graham doubled down on pushing their bill, the watchdog group Responsible Statecraft warned that a 500% tariff could essentially act as a trade embargo And that kind of move might backfire spectacularly. Why? Because it doesn't just punish Russia, it hits America's allies too. Look at the European Union. They've been working hard since 2022 to reduce their dependence on Russian oil and gas. But they're not there yet. Gas imports from Russia have dropped from 150 billion cubic meters in 2021 to 52 billion in 2024. Oil imports have fallen even more, from 27% of the EU's total purchases to just 3%. But those numbers prove the EU is still buying from Russia. It needs more time to find alternatives. If the US bill passes, it could slam the entire European bloc with steep tariffs. Could the US carve out exceptions for its allies? Maybe. But then China and others would call it out as double standards. One rule for Beijing, another for US allies? That kind of hypocrisy would stir up serious diplomatic tensions, and nobody really knows where that could lead, except one thing for sure: more friction and lots of it. And it's not just Europe. Plenty of countries that consider themselves US partners still trade with Russia. The US itself is part of that club. Uranium is one of the products listed in the bill for the 500% tariff. In 2024, the US imported about $624 million worth of enriched uranium and plutonium from Russia. So this bill could end up complicating things even for America's own supply chains. Bottom line, the new bill is a bold gamble. It offers a powerful way to isolate Russia and cut off its war chest. But it also risks dragging the US and its allies into economic crossfire and making diplomatic waves that won't be easy to calm down. Responsible statecraft highlights something important. Even close US allies like Israel and Taiwan are still buying key materials from Russia. For example, Israel imported about $10.6 million worth of plastic from Russia in 2024. Meanwhile, Taiwan is Russia's top buyer of naphtha, a petrochemical used to make plastics. What does that tell us? The global economy is still way too tangled up with Russia when it comes to natural resources. That's the real challenge with these new sanctions bill. The US faces a tough choice. Either let those countries find ways to keep Russia's resource machine running, despite the sanctions, or force them to cut ties and completely walk away. And let's be honest, the second option would trigger a diplomatic roller coaster that won't be easy for Washington to handle. Still, the bill is on the table, and the Senate's majority is backing it. But here's the big question. What about Trump? He's been known to push back on harsh secondary sanctions before. Just recently, after a phone call with Putin on May 19th, Trump signaled some serious hesitation about going all in on those crushing tariffs. "I think there's a chance of getting something done," Trump said. "And if you do that, meaning those tough sanctions, you can also make it much worse." He's got a point. Slapping a massive 500% tariff on Russia's trading partners might actually backfire. Putin could see it as a reason to keep fighting longer, thinking, why stop now if the pain's just getting worse anyway? Right now, it looks like Trump is playing it cool, waiting to see what's actually in Russia's promised peace memorandum. Blumenthal and Graham are on the same page. The US wants to hold off on unleashing any major sanctions until that peace plan lands on the table. So what do you think about Blumenthal and Graham's sanctions proposal? Do you see it making it through the Senate and getting Trump's stamp of approval? And if it does, how hard do you think it'll hit Russia and the countries still buying from Putin? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show for the latest updates on the US-Russia standoff.